So first off and foremost, don't be too disheartened if right now it's your score says that you have a 40 or something. That's probably very good because that's just what the auto grader says. And as I mentioned in class, if you used a term like, sorry, as I mentioned in chat, if you used a term like grandparent and that got marked wrong, even though I've said that even though I've referred to that, that's okay. That's just one of the terms I didn't put in the, it's just the auto grader didn't catch it or whatever. So I wouldn't worry about that. The auto grader, the entire point of it is to speed up the process. So it only tells me if you're definitely right. It doesn't tell me if you're definitely wrong. So I have to do that and go through every semester and go through and manually check off people for their answers. It's fine. Especially if you like misspelled it or something, because ancestor can sometimes be tricky to spell. Like I have trouble spelling necessary. Even though I have to use that, I've used it in so many academic papers, I mess it up all the time. So no worries. And then the remaining points just have to be graded manually, which shouldn't be too hard. I plan on doing that today, hopefully even during class. So we'll see. Then we have a couple of more homeworks remaining. First and most importantly, I should let you know that that stuff does get dropped. So how does that dropping of things work? The dropping of things works much more relevant in a normal semester. When give me 1 second, I am calling myself to log into Canvas, because two-factor authentication requires me to do this every 2 weeks. Okay. Okay. So let's see. All right, data structures. So if we go to our assignments and what we have left, you'll see that I've ixnayed the sorting algorithm assignment. You don't need to do that one anymore. And then we have 2 rules here for your assignments. I dropped the lowest 2 and never dropped Cheater's Hangman. Technically, though, I dropped the lowest 1 because you have solitaire encryption and Joseph's problem. You get, as a choice, you get 0 on one of those, right? So technically, I just dropped 1. That isn't the Cheater's Hangman. So you get 0 on one of these, and this is just because if you don't do either of them and I didn't put them in, then it doesn't get computed. It's just the way it works. Where I have to put in a 0, otherwise it's way too beneficial for the average. So you have the graph set up in the password cracking, and if you've done all the homeworks, then all you have left is the password cracking and the graph setup, and then you could just skip the password cracking. Password cracking, that one goes over top. It's a Project Euler problem. Let me go ahead and show that to you. It is specifically Project Euler 79, I believe. Yep, I called it. And basically, you are asked to decrypt the password. This is, believe it or not, it's a graph problem dressed up as a security problem. Specifically, this is a graph problem of topological sort. So it's a matter of just doing prerequisites and stuff. This is actually something you could solve by hand in a not unreasonable amount of time. We're talking like somewhere maybe between definitely less than an hour to solve it by hand, and probably closer to 15 minutes to half an hour. The sorting homework is now extra credit. The sorting homework is now extra credit, so I'm not going to bother going into it Basically though, what you would have done is you would have taken 3 sorting algorithms and implemented them. But it would have been one of those where I tell you, hey, you can actually copy paste from the internet or whatever, because the algorithm exists. The trick there though is, while you can, is that you modify them to keep track of the number of comparisons and number of exchanges they make. The main thing relevant for the final exam for sorting algorithms is I want you to know how quicksort works. Like being able to do quicksort by hand. But anyway, password cracking, the point is that you use what you use for the 50-point assignment, which is the graph setup. Now, the graph setup is different than any other assignment you've had, simply because what you're going to be doing is you are going to be using an external library. Now, typically what happens, I allow sorting algorithms, graph setup, and password cracking to be done in any programming language you choose. And this semester is no different. You can do graph setup in and password cracking in any language. So if you prefer to work in C#, you can work in C#. If you prefer to work in C++, you can work in C++. If you prefer to work in Python, you can work in Python. The main thing is learning how your yes, you can, if you want to use yeah, if you want to, you can use languages other than Java for the sorting algorithm question. The main thing here is that you learn how to use an external library. You can build a graph to use, but it's a pain, a graph data structure, but it's a pain in the butt. So rather than doing that, Java has Jung, which is pretty good. There's a newer version of Jung that's on GitHub, I believe. So, but this one works with the instructions I have, and it's no problem. You know, Java's nice and backwards compatible. So, and I go through and I have multiple videos on how to set up Jung, but basically I'm just trying to get you, if you're doing in Java, to learn how to use external jar files, external libraries in your program. And I have a series of 3 videos, one for IntelliJ, one for Eclipse, and one for NetBeans, on how to do this. And if you have trouble with this, it's fine. Now, if you're doing this in Python, the external library you want to use is Network X. Network X, which is an amazing graph library for Python. It's really good. I mean, look, they even put a little doodad on their website. You know it's got to be good. It is extremely powerful and extremely useful for doing these kinds of problems. Again, you want to try to use an external library for this. I don't know what you would need to use for C#. I'm sure one exists. Same with any other language, but I'm always thrilled to see people do it in a language of their choice. You know, obviously you don't want to torture yourself and do it in an esoteric language like Ook or other languages that are not meant to actually be programmed in, and they're meant as memes. But regardless, it's a good assignment, and all you're doing in the end. So why are we doing, what are we doing to test this? Very simple. You create a graph class to store nodes and edges, or download a Jung graph library such as Jung. You use it to implement breadth first search and depth first search. Follow the video from class if you need reference. It is one of the shortest assignments I ever wrote, because there's really not much to it. It's mainly getting those videos mainly want to show you getting it set up. And the other reason I have this set up is so that when you do password cracking, which requires a graph and a graphing library to do, you have that tool available for you. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, before I move, okay, yes, chat. Yeah, no, I said I just said you probably want to avoid meme languages, which is yes, esoteric languages. Like BF, which I'm not going to say what that real name is in class. The language based on BF, which is Ook, Malboj. Those are off the top of my head. What other ones are there? Folders. That's hilarious. Oh, that's yeah. Okay, yes. This is literally a okay, and I recognize, yeah, with the commands I recognize this. This is I believe this is BF. And if you know what BF is, you know why I'm not saying the full name. It starts with brain though. So but it's yeah, basically you have exactly 8 kind of commands here. So that's fun. That's fun. You're more than welcome to try it. But I mean, like, I question your sanity maybe if you actually do it. Okay. So before I move on to talking about the before we move on, I want to know about questions for the current assignment due tonight, which is our Cheater's Hangman. How are people doing on that? I believe, because I know that people were having issues yesterday when I was talking. And so if there's any specific questions that people want me to answer, please ask them because I will answer them. I mean, if you prefer me to answer them individually in your room, I can do that. Okay. Let's see. If you did not take the exam with me for some reason on yesterday, because I got 2 students who sent me emails and said, yo, this is going to be a problem. Thank you for sending me that email. That's great. That's exactly how I like this thing to go. If you're in class today, please just chat with me about arranging a time for us to do it. I'm pretty much free anytime, not tonight. So yeah. Okay. If there's no questions, then I will split you up into breakout rooms. Oh, right. Final exam. Okay. So final exam. There is no practice exam for that. However, what I do have is a bunch of videos that I've done in the past where I've gone over the practice exams of other institutions, the practice final exams or the actual final exams of other institutions. You can search just check the playlists of the other. So if you go to lecture recordings, you can, why am I just talking? I should just show you maybe. That seems like a good idea. So yeah. Assignments, data structure. So if we just go back to home for a second and go to the lecture recordings, we can just scroll down here to the previous semesters, and any of these previous semesters will do. Just click on the icon over here, and you can see that I have a bunch of final exams reviews videos over here. And they're pretty much all the same, where I'm just going over the final exam from other institutions. So like I think I've done a practice exam from Harvard, which I always do that one. Actually, it's very good. That practice exam. But it's basically these practice exams are very robust, and they do a good job of going over things and also showing you what you want. Also, last thing, sorry, and now something like not related to class. Now that you're kind of done with this class, believe it or not, you are pretty much ready for doing internships and the like, or applying for large companies, such as Google. You may not feel like you're qualified. That's and let me put it this way. You are not experienced enough to tell whether you are qualified or not. You don't have a good grasp of what your own capabilities are quite yet. It took me until I was like multiple years into it took me until I was in grad school and a couple years into grad school to be fully comfortable with the idea that, oh, actually, I do know how to code. So it's very hard for you to have an objective opinion of your own capabilities, especially if you don't think you're that very good at it. So I would say apply for these positions and let the company make the decision as to whether or not you're qualified, because at the worst case scenario, it's a net positive for you because you get to learn how the interview process works. And I'd be happy to talk about how my interview, the way my interviews for Google went when I interviewed with them. I would also, but if you want to practice interviews in general, this is the website I recommend, which is pramp.com. What this is that this is a peer-to-peer mock interview service. Okay. And it's free. You get like 5 mock interviews, and then the way it works is pyramid scheme. Essentially, you send email to people to sign up, and once you get 3, you get infinite, essentially. So the idea here, though, is that you do a peer-to-peer mock interview and you get matched with another person. And what happens is that you schedule for an hour and you both get like 30 minutes to interview each other. So you get given a question that you are asked, and then and then you ask a question. So let's look at this question that I asked, that I was said, hey, so they give you a question to ask other people. They give it to you before the interview, and they tell you, hey, here's the question to give. Here's the hints to give to the other person. And here's the answer on how to do this. Let's look at this one. BST successor search. In a binary search tree, an in-order successor of a node is defined by the node as the node with the smallest key greater than the key of the input node. So here, the in-order successor of 9 is 11. In other words, it's the smallest thing bigger than that. That sounds familiar. That's the thing we have to find when we delete. In other words, given a node, go right and then go as hard as left as possible. That's the answer they're supposed to get to, by the way. Yeah, saying it should run in no more than 50 milliseconds because a computer, even if it's a not a great computer. Oh, and by the way, it supports multiple languages, and you get to say which language you want to get matched with. So this seems familiar, but as you can see, that's the kind of questions that we like to ask. This one I was asked, and it's one of my favorite ones of all because it's not like theoretically difficult, but it was technically interesting, challenging. So given a 2D array matrix of integers, all right, here we go. Create a function called spiral copy that copies these values into a 1D array in spiral order clockwise. So your function should then return the array. So here's my input where I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So, and then 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's 4 by 5. So 4 rows, 5 columns. or rather 4 arrays of length 5. So, and then this is our output. It's one array and it's in this order. Specifically, spiral order, it means like this, where we're just spiraling inward like that. So, it just requires it just requires planning in order to do it. It's not necessarily awful, but I remember this one, and I remember doing very well on this one as opposed to other ones, because there's ways where you can accidentally program yourself into kind of a corner, because which is an issue because you're trying to program yourself into the center. That's just a joke. But this is a great resource for like just practicing and getting those nerves out of the way, because honestly, that's a valuable thing. The first interview I ever had for a professor position, I was awful. I bombed that. It was terrible. It was a horrible experience and super awkward. But every other phone interview I had went much better for professor positions after that, because I did the first one and now I knew how they kind of went, which was good. And the same thing goes for these kind of interviews. Your first experience will generally be awful, but that's okay. So try to get that first experience out of the way by doing something that's, completely different. Hopefully that is valuable information to you. Otherwise, I would suggest like practicing doing Project Euler, or another one I like is Advent of Code. So Advent of Code is something that happens every year. And it's 25 pairs of problems that are linked together. And the entire thing of it is that it's Christmas themed. It comes out around Christmas. And it's basically, you need to solve these problems in order to save Christmas. So it's just, fun problems in a fun setting. And it's fair, and in general, it's a fun way to hone your skills. There's lots of different tools, but I recommend these kind of things. Cramp for your data, for your actual questions. And then if you just want to get generally better at mathematical stuff, Project Euler, because these are math problems and very, very good ones. All right. In general, though, don't be afraid to go out and, and essentially make a fool of yourself doing interviews. Don't be afraid. You're probably not as big of a fool as you think you are. No, because we are all fools. We're just doing our best to be competent ones. Okay.